Welcome to Truth Behind History, where we dive deep into the events that shape the world we live in today. In this video, we're exploring one of the most pivotal movements in history, the Protestant Reformation. Now, when people think of history-changing moments, they might picture grand battles, royal power struggles, or massive discoveries. But sometimes, revolutions start with an idea, a challenge to the way things have always been. That's exactly what happened in the 16th century when a movement arose that reshaped religion, politics, and society in ways that still affect us today. The Protestant Reformation was more than just a religious dispute. It was an upheaval that shattered the authority of the Catholic Church, redefined power structures, and laid the foundation for many aspects of the modern world. So what exactly happened, and why does it still matter? In this video, we're going to break it all down. We'll explore the dramatic events that sparked the Reformation, the key figures who led the charge, and the sweeping changes it brought to Europe. We'll also take a look at its long-term impact on democracy, economics, and even modern capitalism. By the end of this video, you'll see how a theological debate from centuries ago continues to influence the world we live in today. So stick around, because this is history you don't want to miss. Now, let's start at the beginning. What led to this massive shift in European society? Our story begins in the early 16th century, a time when the Catholic Church held immense power over both spiritual and political life in Europe. But with great power came great controversy. Many people believed the Church had become corrupt, more focused on wealth and influence than on faith and morality. Enter Martin Luther, a German monk, a scholar, and, as it turns out, an accidental revolutionary. On October 31st, 1517, Luther did something that, at first glance, might not have seemed all that radical. He nailed a document to the door of the Wittenberg Church. This document, known as the 95 Theses, was a list of complaints against the Catholic Church, particularly criticizing the sale of indulgences. Indulgences were essentially payments people could make to reduce their punishment for sins. The Church claimed that by giving money, people could shorten their time in purgatory or even secure their place in heaven. But Luther saw this as a blatant form of corruption, a way for the Church to exploit people's fears and profit from salvation. Luther's words might have remained a local dispute if not for one key technological advantage, the printing press. Thanks to this relatively new invention, his ideas spread like wildfire. Within weeks, copies of his theses were being read all across Europe, igniting a debate that could no longer be contained. The Catholic Church was not amused. Luther's defiance challenged the Pope's authority, and his arguments raised deeper questions about the very nature of faith, salvation, and the Church's role in people's lives. What started as a religious critique quickly escalated into a full-blown political and social upheaval. And so, the Protestant Reformation had begun. But Luther's actions were only the first domino to fall. Soon, new religious movements would emerge, and the very fabric of European society would be reshaped. Let's take a look at how Protestantism spread across Europe and changed the course of history. With Luther's ideas now circulating across Europe, the Reformation was no longer just about one man, it was about a movement. And what a movement it became. The printing press continued to be a game-changer. Suddenly, religious debates weren't confined to scholars and clergy. Ordinary people could read Luther's arguments, discuss them, and form their own opinions. For the first time in history, large numbers of people had access to religious texts in their own languages, rather than only in Latin. This gave rise to a new sense of personal faith, free from the control of the Catholic Church. But Luther wasn't the only voice in this growing movement. In Switzerland, John Calvin introduced his own theological teachings, emphasizing ideas like predestination, the belief that God had already determined who would be saved. Calvinism took root in places like Switzerland, Scotland, and parts of France, influencing Protestant thought in profound ways. Meanwhile, the Reformation wasn't just a theological movement, it became political. Many rulers saw an opportunity to break away from the control of the Pope and the Holy Roman Empire. By establishing Protestant churches under their own authority, they could assert their independence and strengthen their power. This is why we see the rise of national churches, such as the Church of England under Henry VIII. The Reformation was no longer just about religion. It was becoming a battle for power, identity, and the future of Europe. And with such dramatic shifts, conflict was inevitable. Now, let's examine the political and social impact of this transformation. As the Protestant Reformation spread, it became clear that this was more than just a religious movement. It had profound effects on politics, governance, and society as a whole. In fact, the Reformation played a major role in shaping the modern concept of the nation-state. Before the Reformation, much of Europe was united under the authority of the Pope and the Holy Roman Empire. But as Protestantism gained traction, monarchs saw an opportunity. By rejecting the Pope's authority and establishing their own national churches, rulers asserted greater control over their territories. This helped solidify the idea of state sovereignty, the principle that each nation governs itself without interference from outside religious or political powers. But, of course, such massive changes didn't come peacefully. The Reformation fueled some of the bloodiest conflicts in European history. Religious wars broke out as Catholic and Protestant factions clashed for control. One of the most devastating of these was the 30 Years' War, a brutal and complex conflict that involved nearly every major European power. The war reshaped borders, shifted alliances, and left a trail of destruction in its wake. Despite the chaos, the Reformation also brought lasting social changes. One of the biggest shifts was in education. Protestants placed a heavy emphasis on reading the Bible, which meant literacy rates skyrocketed in Protestant regions. Public education became more widespread, laying the foundation for the modern schooling systems we see today. So while the Reformation divided Europe, it also pushed societies toward new ideas about governance, individual rights, and education. And speaking of transformation, let's take a closer look at how the Reformation reshaped the economy. The Reformation didn't just change religion and politics, it also played a huge role in shaping modern capitalism. That's right, some of the economic systems we take for granted today can trace their roots back to the Protestant Reformation. One of the most famous theories about this connection comes from sociologist Max Weber, who introduced the idea of the Protestant work ethic. He argued that Protestant values, particularly those stemming from Calvinism, emphasized hard work, discipline, and frugality. Unlike Catholic traditions that sometimes discouraged the accumulation of wealth, Protestantism encouraged success in business and personal financial responsibility as a sign of moral virtue. This cultural shift had massive economic consequences. Protestant nations embraced commerce and industry at a rapid pace. Wealth and trade power began shifting away from Catholic-dominated regions like Spain and Italy and toward Protestant countries like England and the Dutch Republic. These Protestant economies became centers of innovation, entrepreneurship, and global trade. And then there's the banking and financial revolution. Calvinist teachings, which rejected the Catholic Church's opposition to charging interest on loans, helped lay the groundwork for modern banking systems. Investment, credit, and new financial institutions flourished in Protestant nations, helping to build the global capitalist economy that dominates today. So whether we realize it or not, the Reformation didn't just change people's faith, it changed how they worked, how they made money, and how economies functioned. And as we'll see next, it also led to some of the most violent conflicts in European history. If there's one thing history teaches us, it's that revolutions rarely come without a fight, and the Protestant Reformation was no exception. As Catholic and Protestant factions grew further apart, tensions boiled over into violence, leading to some of the most brutal conflicts Europe had ever seen. Religious wars erupted across the continent. In Germany, France, England, and beyond, Protestant and Catholic forces battled for control. These weren't just skirmishes over doctrine, they were full-scale wars that determined the fate of entire nations. The most infamous of these conflicts was the 30 Years' War, which raged from 1618 to 1648. This war started as a battle between Protestant and Catholic states in the Holy Roman Empire, but it quickly escalated into a larger struggle involving most of the major European powers. It was one of the deadliest conflicts in European history, leading to millions of deaths through battle, famine, and disease. By the time the war ended, Europe was forever changed. The Peace of Westphalia, signed in 1648, marked a turning point. It established the principle of state sovereignty, meaning that each nation had the right to determine its own religion and governance without outside interference. This was a huge step toward the modern system of independent nation-states that we have today. But the Reformation's influence didn't stop there. It continued to shape Europe in ways that extended far beyond the battlefield. Let's explore how it helped create the modern world. Even centuries after it began, the Reformation's impact can still be felt. It didn't just change religious beliefs, it fundamentally reshaped European society, politics, and intellectual life. One of the biggest changes was the rise of religious pluralism. Before the Reformation, the Catholic Church held a virtual monopoly on Christianity in Western Europe. But after the split, Europe became a patchwork of different Christian traditions. This diversity laid the groundwork for the idea of religious tolerance, which would later influence the Enlightenment and the development of secular governments. The Reformation also played a crucial role in the rise of democracy. By challenging the absolute authority of the Church, Protestant thinkers helped spread ideas about individual rights and self-governance. The notion that people could read and interpret the Bible for themselves carried over into political thought. If individuals could challenge religious authority, why not political authority as well? These ideas helped inspire movements for democratic governance in later centuries. And let's not forget the impact on education and science. With Protestants emphasizing literacy and personal Bible study, education became a key priority. This focus on learning fueled advancements in scientific inquiry, leading to an explosion of discoveries during the scientific revolution. The world we live in today, with its mix of religious diversity, democratic ideals, and rapid scientific progress, owes a great deal to the Protestant Reformation. But why does all of this still matter in the 21st century? Let's wrap things up with a look at how the Reformation continues to shape our world today. So, after all of this, you might be wondering, why should we still care about the Protestant Reformation today? Well, its legacy is all around us. First, there's religious freedom. The Reformation shattered the Catholic Church's monopoly on Christianity, paving the way for religious diversity and tolerance. The idea that individuals should be able to choose their faith without government interference has become a core principle of many modern societies. Then there's democracy. The Reformation encouraged people to question authority and seek personal understanding. These same principles carried over into political thought, inspiring movements for representative government and human rights. And finally, there's its cultural and economic influence. The Protestant work ethic helped shape modern capitalism, and the focus on literacy and education laid the foundation for scientific and technological advancements. In short, the Reformation didn't just change religion, it changed the entire trajectory of Western civilization. Now, if you found this video interesting and want to learn more about history's biggest turning points, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to Truth Behind History. We've got plenty of other deep dives into the events that shaped our world, so check them out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.